And a welcome to the Wizarding Wireless Network podcast with me, AJ.
And me, Will.
Together we will be bringing you our no-holds-barred thoughts, opinions and detailed analysis on all things Wizarding World. So with that in mind, please grab yourself a glass of fire whiskey and settle into this week's episode of the WWN.
Welcome to the Wizarding Wireless Network with your hosts AJ and Will, streaming to you on all of your favourite podcast providers and on YouTube. On today's episode, we are going to be going through Chapter 14, Norbert the Norwegian Ridgeback.
Excellent news, Norbert. Finally, we get to meet you, my dear.
Or as we later find out, Norberta.
I know. I'm surprised they didn't cover that in the many books that Hagrid got from the library, how to tell the gender of a dragon.
Well, it kind of shows his good parenting skills, doesn't it? The fact that he's very novice at it all.
Yeah, he loves it unconditionally. But yeah, what did you think about this chapter?
I mean, it's definitely one of my favourite chapters. Is it? But yeah, I don't know. I quite like the kind of them sneaking around and kind of like trying to get Norbert out of the castle. But I think it's definitely, I don't know. It kind of gives you a bit more backstory as to kind of what's going on with the stone. They find out a bit more about kind of the things that are guarding it. Mm-hmm. But then I kind of get very disappointed with this chapter because in my mind, I know how much this is all condensed in the film.
Yeah, I think my impression of reading it is that a lot happens in such a relatively long period of time over the course of this chapter. But whereas in the movie, it's just, as you say, been condensed down into like 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, literally, this seems like Norbert gets hatched. Like, they go over to Hagrid's in an evening. Norbert's just there. He hatches. Malfoy finds out, and then they're in detention the next evening. Yeah.
But whereas we know from reading this, it's not the case whatsoever.
No. So we kind of start off with this chapter kind of even way before. I know this whole chapter's about Norbert, but we kind of start this chapter way before that, and it almost tips from what we were talking about in the last chapter with Quirrell and Snape having this disagreement. Mm-hmm. And what made me laugh, it's one of these little details that I always forget happens in the book. And it's the little nod of Harry starts walking past Quirrell and giving him little smiles, and then he starts standing up for Quirrell.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, in your head, you're like, no, don't do this.
I know, it's like, the more you know. The more you know.
First time readers, you think like, oh no, that's fine, you're on their side. But then as soon as you reread this chapter, you're kind of like, oh guys, you're going completely off topic. No, red herring. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. That guys as well about this chapter as well that I really do like is the fact that you can now start to see how much of a bookworm that Hermione actually is, because she then starts to come out with her colour-coded notes and revision timetables for the exams that are 10 weeks away. Ron and Harry are just completely oblivious to the fact they're still very much obsessing over the stone, but Hermione's like, yeah, I've cracked that a wee while ago, so let's move on to wand movements and all the other bits and bobs.
She's completely head down in books, revising. She knows what type of learner she is. She's completely like getting out. Like, to be fair, I was probably about the same when I was going through uni. I had my chart. I had like my colour-coded highlighted blocks of when my exam was going to be, counting down the days. Mm-hmm. But she is so in her element. And I think this is where, I don't know whether the boys start resenting her a little bit for it, but they definitely kind of begrudgingly go along with it.
Yeah. But saying that, much to their merit, I would say, because Hermione realistically probably does pull them through the majority of their school years. But this is another thing as well that Hermione slips in to this chapter, which was really not touched upon in the movies, is the fact that if they don't pass these exams, they can't progress to second year. And it makes me wonder, did any pupils fail Hogwarts in first year and then have to drop out? Or do they reset? Like, what's the process?
Well, I actually kind of had the same thought process, because I was suddenly thinking, like, is it like with uni where, like, you all come in, there's like 300 of you, and then by the time you get into second year, there's 20 of you. Mm-hmm. And then by third year, there's 5 of you. And it's all like this cull of students.
Mm-hmm.
So I had the exact same thought. But I don't know, because why would you go through all the rigmarole of getting people into Hogwarts only to then kick them out?
Exactly. I mean, don't get me wrong, there must be like some form of like remedial classes as well to help them out. Because in the nicest possible way, we know that Neville Longbottom didn't really show that much magical talent in first year. I say that compared to Harry, who didn't cast a single spell in that first movie. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, they're literally on par, but Neville gets the brunt of it.
Yeah, and it's like, if Neville can pass it, then I'm pretty sure anyone else can.
Yeah. Well, put it this way, if Seamus can pass it and he blows everything up.
Well, very true. Very true.
I think what typically happens, I think this is more Hermione getting too into things. I think it's more a case of if you don't pass, you kind of have to resit parts of first year in second year.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of deal.
Okay, so just like carrying stuff over, like carrying the credits over.
Yeah, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough.
I did find it quite interesting though when you were looking through the bits that they were revising. Like we keep reiterating this whole thing of the breadcrumbs throughout the series.
Yep.
And one of the things that Harry was then looking up was Dittany.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's one of those things that you kind of like, it's world building without you realising it's world building, because suddenly later on in the other books, you then get essence of Dittany coming out. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, it all kind of links up.
Yeah. I think in the terms of the movies as well, you only really seen that once, didn't you?
Yeah, literally, it's that bit
in Deathly
Hallows. Yeah.
That tiny little bit, but whenever you it's as I said, I was one of these people that watched the movies and then read the books just because I was such a chronically slow reader. But seeing these little things going so far back to the Philosopher's Stone, as you said, it is absolute a joy to see this world being built right before your eyes.
Mm. I think this is what was really missed out in the films, is the fact that it's all these little details that make the world more alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's not to say that you didn't get that from the films, because I think you and I are in the same boat. We kind of read the books post watching films.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't detract from that world building, but you get so much more depth in the book.
Yeah, absolutely. You do. It's so good. Another little bit in this chapter which I thought was quite funny, for lack of a better phrase. So you like going through it and you sort of realise the importance of the Philosopher's Stone. Now at this stage we've established what it does. We've established who we think is trying to get it. And now when they see Hagrid in the library looking at books, he then just sort of says to the trio, "Oh, you're not still looking for Nicholas Flamel, are you?" And then Ron all of a sudden goes very impressively, "Oh, we know with the dog's garden, it's a Philosopher's Stone." In the nicest possible way. What is wrong with you, Ron?
Literally, you are in a public space talking about top secret information. You do not say shit like that out in public.
No, it's like the situational awareness is none.
Literally, for Ron, it just doesn't exist.
And the fact that even Hagrid is like, shush. In Hagrid, he's normally like, he doesn't really care what he says. He's like, I shouldn't have said that. But even he knows you just do not say stuff like that, especially in a public place.
But I think it's quite nice because it's very much how kids are, and it's very much how like young adults act, where it's a case of like, we figure things out. We want to tell you kind of everything. There's no restraint with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have to go into so much detail and explain. Like, you know, when you ask like someone who's a bit younger to kind of go, "Oh, have you done this yet?" And they go, "No." but it's because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Like, there's no just kind of, no, unfortunately I didn't get round to doing it.
Yeah.
And leave it at that.
Yeah, there's got to be a justification for it.
It very much feels like that. And it comes across so well because of their age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very nicely done, I would say. Very nicely done.
So the trio then, obviously, to Hagrid's reluctancy, he has to get them back round to the hut because obviously they're not going to talk about things like the Philosopher's Stone out in the middle of the library in the middle of the day. Mm-hmm. So he invites them back to his hut and they start going through dragons of all things.
Dragons indeed. I know. Now, I thoroughly enjoyed this little line here because there was a tiny section just before we get to Hagrid's hut where we know that he is essentially breeding the dragon. And Harry then sort of asked, there aren't any dragons in Britain, surely? And then Ron says, well, of course they are. You know, you've got the Hebridean Blacks and also the common Welsh Green, which I thought was really nice, sort of linking to that bit in the Goblet of Fire. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's all of these subtle little details of like, okay, well, actually, the Welsh Green makes another reappearance then in Goblet of Fire. Mm-hmm. It's so good.
Who gets the Welsh Green again? Is it Fleur?
Crumb gets Chinese Fireball.
Ooh. I'm sure it is Fleur.
Swedish Short Snout is Cedric.
Yeah, it was Fleur.
Yeah. But it also makes me kind of wonder, like, actually how many species of dragons there are. Because if you think about how small the UK is in comparison to most other countries, if there's 2 types of dragons just within the UK, how many are there then across other countries?
Well, exactly. Pat, I could be making this up, but I'm sure, you know, in the Hogwarts Library series, there's something in that about the majority, the dragon breeds in the UK. I could be wrong. Let me have a little look here.
Well, I know in the illustrated edition of one of the books, so you've got all the dragon eggs. Mm-hmm. So it goes through a little picture of all the different types of dragon eggs that you could potentially have and what colour they would be. Yeah. Which I think, like, all the illustrations for these are amazing. But I know what you mean. There is definitely, like, one of the books out there and it has all the different breeds of dragons.
Oh. Mm-hmm. I'm sure we'll come onto that at some point.
Oh,
Goblet of Fire-esque.
Yep, going through different types of dragons.
Mm-hmm. So I think now we're at Hagrid's hut. So yeah, we've now arrived at Hagrid and he has offered them tea and stoat sandwiches.
Which they very quickly have learnt to refuse.
Exactly.
So obviously we kind of get Hagrid now doing a lot of the infilling of information. So if you haven't necessarily been paying attention to all these little details or you haven't been able to piece them together, this is almost a chapter that glues everything together before the big reveal. Mm-hmm. So you have things like the fact that the stone was moved at the beginning of the book. That's what Hagrid was collecting from Gringotts. The whole thing that was then stolen from Gringotts was someone trying to break in and steal the stone. Mm-hmm. And then we then go through who is actually then been tasked with guarding the stone. Now, what I quite like is how Hermione manages to get that information out of Hagrid by the flattery and the flirting. Yeah, it's like the quickest way to Hagrid's heart is just to chuck him a nice comment, isn't it? Exactly. It's like, oh, Dumbledore trusted you the most. That's why Fluffy is the first thing. Mm-hmm. It's like, I think he really does get a sense of pride about being trusted by Dumbledore. I think for him it was like he really does idolise Dumbledore, like to a godlike extent. But I like this bit because it's sort of almost Hagrid just spills his guts, for lack of a better phrase, like without Veritaserum. And it tells you all about how many of the spells, enchantments and certain defences that the stone has got in place. So you've got Professor Sprout, Professor Flitwick, Professor McGonagall, Professor Quirrell,
Dumbledore himself and Professor Snape, which comes as a surprise to everyone. The fact that...
I think... Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, it comes like as a surprise to the trio that Snape is helping to guard the stone. But in their mind at this point, they still think Snape is very much going to try and steal it. But of course, well, why wouldn't you? As in, if you were Snape, you would put your 2 pence in.
I think the thing is, it almost throws you off either way. Like, you kind of think, well, if you thought Quirrell's the bad guy, but Quirrell is also helping protect the stone, so obviously you're going to rule him out. But then, like you said, Snape also is then guarding the stone. So both people, where they could be the one who's the bad guy, both are also protecting the stone.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think what's quite nice as well is you get that subtle hint, because obviously Hagrid then doesn't know what each of the protections are. He just knows who has been involved.
It sort of makes you wonder, does every teacher, with the exception of Dumbledore, know exactly what enchantment is which? Because, for one, do you think Snape would know what his enchantment... I'm trying to think of the way to word this. So if, foreshadowing a little bit onto Deathly Hallows, back to the Prince's Tale, but if we then think at this stage Snape is Dumbledore's man, does Snape know exactly everything that is being used to protect the stone?
Interesting. And maybe he does, because if you think about where Snape's protection falls, it's the last one before the chamber.
Yeah.
So actually, possibly, he is then just as close to Dumbledore with knowing actually what each protection is.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I think, though, it gives you as a reader a bit of a subtle hint, and you can kind of guess like what each one could be, because you know what each teacher teaches at this point. So you kind of get this subtle hint, and it's like, okay, is it going to be something towards their specialty? And as we know, obviously, having read the book, watched the films, we know what each one is, and it is linked very much closely to their specialty.
Yeah.
But I think as a reader reading this for the first time, you kind of get a sense of this, I don't know, like group. It is group effort. I wanted to say camaraderie. It's not really, but
yeah, I know what you mean. It's like they understand the risks involved, and they understand exactly what the dangers are of the stone getting taken. So they put their best and brightest in. Because I think transfiguration magic, Professor McGonagall, that was a pretty decent, go at it.
And it's completely out there for what you would think McGonagall could set up as a transfiguration protection, a actual live human-sized chessboard. That is something like really like Nebula.
Yeah, like with the risk of death.
Yeah, like it's a live battlefield essentially.
Essentially, yeah. I absolutely love it. I love it. And Professor Sprout chucking the devil's snare, and I'm trying to think of any other dangerous plants, with the exception of a venomous tentacula.
See, that was going to be my first thing, was venomous tentacula.
Yeah.
Unless you want to go into kind of like Hogwarts Legacy, where you've got chomping cabbages and stuff like that.
Exactly.
But yeah, that would be my kind of next thought. Without it being devil's snare, it's kind of venomous tentacula is your next dangerous plant. What this links quite nicely to is then what we see in the Deathly Hallows when they're doing all the protections for the castle. So it's almost like the protections for the stone on a large scale. Yeah.
Like very much so.
So I think this is quite nice. You kind of get a taste of what the teachers are capable of.
And I love these little bits in the books, because like coming on to Deathly Hallows, there's a part in it where Professor McGonagall says, we teachers are quite good at magic, and it's almost as if the students don't really believe it. But I absolutely love seeing scenes like that, when you can actually just see the extent to which these teachers know their craft and they know their branch of magic. Like for
Absolutely.
me, my absolute favourite scene is the Pure Totem Locomotor scene, I think, out of all 8 movies, because part of me thinks they could have went so much further with that. And they genuinely could have. But I love the scene itself. I genuinely
It's such a goosebump scene. But yeah, when you read it in the book, and it's not just the stone statues from like the Great Hall, because like the thing is that was obviously put in the Deathly Hallows because of that scene. We hadn't seen any statues in that kind of hallway, the entranceway, all 6 films. Deathly Hallows comes along, wall to ceiling, floor to ceiling, statues.
Yeah, it's sort of kind of like when Dumbledore died and Snape moved in. I can just see him with like a group of Death Eaters behind him with clipboards. Like, so we're taking this down, we're putting these up, we're going to have a complete refurb. I'm going to make it my own. Do you know what I mean?
It's very Beetlejuice, isn't it? It's the whole thing of like, I am going to go insane if you do not let me like make any adjustments to this castle. It be so set up in Deathly Hallows for that scene, whereas in the book we know it's just all the random statues. Like you have everything from like these big troll statues to tiny little elf statues, all coming essentially to life.
Yeah,
rather than just an army of the same kind of carbon copy statues.
Yeah, it's like the castle takes on its own personality. It's like something we always knew about the castle was that, and I've said this before, it's not necessarily a building, it's a living thing.
Yeah.
It is, it's an absolutely living thing. And I think by McGonagall casting that spell and everything coming to life, it really did show the personality of that building and its contents.
It wasn't just bringing the statues to life, it was making the castle, like it was waking the castle up, essentially.
100%.
It does give you this nice little introduction to what the teachers can do, and it's almost a smaller scale of what we see in the Deathly Hallows with Professor Sprout using Devil's Snare as a protection for the stone, whereas she does that within the whole of the Hogwarts grounds for the castle. So these nice little subtle hints. But we then find out that obviously, like you said, Snape is also part of those protections, which really throws the trio off.
Yeah.
I think the only saving grace for the trio at this point is the fact that none of the other teachers know what the other teachers have put in place and how to get past the other teachers'
defenses. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it does make you kind of wonder if Hermione, Harry and Ron, as a first-year student in Hogwarts, could get past them. It does kind of make you wonder, how difficult were they?
Well, very true. Very true. But saying that, I think with the 3 of them, I don't imagine that any one of them could have done it on their own. Do you know what I mean?
True.
I mean, I think if you put Hermione in the chessboard on her own, she'd be screwed.
Yeah, true. She would have got to the chessboard. Well, actually, no, she wouldn't even got past the keys because she can't fly a broomstick.
Yeah. You don't get me wrong, she might have been able to do it, but very poorly. Very poorly. When you look at Ron, he would have died in the Devil's Snare.
Yeah.
And then...
Harry probably would have died in Devil's Snare because he didn't know how to... He only followed what Hermione said.
Exactly. So yeah, I think...
Okay, true.
As a trio, they make one good brain. Individually, not so much. I think that was probably the whole reason of having the various amount of traps.
And all with their different skill mixes, because you have your branch of magic, like we've talked about in a previous episode, you have your branch of magic that you might be very good at, but all the other ones you kind of like drop away. It's like trying to be very good at everything in school. You can't be good at science, maths, art, English, and all the other bits that go on.
Yeah, it's like you find your niche and you sort of stick to it.
Moving on then with the rest of the chapter, we then get Hagrid explaining a bit more, and then Harry then makes a comment about Hagrid opening a window and cooling the place down because it is so warm. Only to find that Hagrid has got a dragon egg on the fire.
Quelle surprise.
I know. Not that the trio had already worked it out at this point.
I know. It does make me wonder, though, about Hagrid, because surely to God, right, I know that he got expelled in his... What year was in? Was it his 3rd year at Hogwarts?
second or third year.
Second or third year. Like, where has his common sense? Like, you just do not, like, you live in a wooden hut, as Hermione then pointed out to him. And you thought, let's bring in a fire-breathing dragon as a pet.
Yeah, that grows twice the size of the hut that you live in. And not to mention, it is illegal.
It's like, you can't just get away with hiding that.
Just bring one in. Why not?
I don't crack on.
I think this is the whole thing with Hagrid's character, is this whole kind of delusion that he's in of actually all beasts are lovable.
Yeah.
They're all just very misunderstood. It's very much a Newt kind of perception of beasts. Which I get. I do get the whole idea of actually, no, it's because beasts are just misunderstood creatures. But then there's just some that Hagrid gravitates towards that just aren't misunderstood. They're just dangerous. Full stop, Hagrid. Stop trying.
I know. It's sort of kind of like he looks for the danger in everything and tries to find the good in everything as well, which I love about him. He's just such a gentle and pure soul.
It's like, oh, it just slices your arm off, but don't worry, it didn't mean it.
Exactly. Although, I hate this as well. Although, so as Hagrid says, pulling a large book from under his pillow, got this out of the library. Dragon breeding for pleasure and profit. It's a bit out of date, of course. Illegal, Hagrid, illegal. Filth.
Bestiality.
You know how you were talking about a subreddit for Bill Weasley? No, Charlie Weasley?
Yeah.
That's in the dark web, this.
Subreddit for Hagrid.
Subreddit for Hagrid and Norbert. Exactly. But then the question is then posed by Ron. How did he actually procure the dragon egg? Because they say that it must have cost a fair fortune. And then Hagrid says that he won it in a card game with a stranger in the village.
Yeah, down the pub.
Down the pub. It's like, most people, play for money, but no, let's have a dragon egg. Let's go for it.
Shove that on the table.
Could you imagine? Makes me wonder though, what pub were they in?
Oh, it's got to be the Three Broomsticks.
Or the Hog's Head.
Or maybe Hog's Head. A bit more of a...
I think Hagrid's got more of a Hog's Head vibe to him, if he's playing cards. I don't really imagine Rosmerta would be a bit chuffed seeing people gamble for dragon eggs. Aberforth, probably, he'd be a bit okay with it.
Yeah, it's a bit more of a kind of dark alley pub.
Absolutely.
Do you agree with how the book or the film did this conversation? In terms of how Hagrid explains that he met strangers in the pub and he won it from them, but he wanted to know about Fluffy. Like, in the film, that conversation really speeds up the kind of piecing things together.
Yeah. I mean,
whereas in the book, it doesn't do that too much.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think for the movie, you can see why they had done it because they had to kind of hurry it along a little bit. But I like the way that they did it in the book because it was just like gradual breadcrumbs the whole way through. It was like it gave you just enough to keep wanting more, but it didn't rush you on too much.
Yeah, and I think looking at the book, I mean, you've still got like a fair amount of the book left compared to what we've already gone through. We're not that far towards the end, but we still got a good amount left. Whereas in the film, I feel like you get past, I think it's when they find about Nicholas Flamel, suddenly the film just goes straight from like that, and then it's in like the last 10 minutes, it's like, right, we're going down the trapdoor, we're doing this, we're finding out what's going on, and you're kind of like, oh my god, what the hell is happening? Yeah,
it's like so much is happening in such a short space of time.
Because I think I tried to pause it before, like when they're in the dark forest. I think it's when they find out about the unicorn blood.
Yep.
And it's kind of like as soon as they get through detention, it's like, okay, like, we need to go down the trap door tonight.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, like, we've got 15 minutes of the film left. I thought that you kind of think in your head, like, oh no, that's maybe like middle of the film. Like, no, this is all 15 minutes towards the end.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I prefer it in the book because it gives you that enough information to kind of keep reading, but not so much that it almost feels like, okay, now we're speeding through the rest of the book. Let's kind of hurry this along, let's get to the end and the plot hole.
Yeah.
Not the plot hole, but, you know, like the reveal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. But talking of reveals, it turns out that the Golden Trio and Hagrid, their little rendezvous was cut relatively short because they had a peeping Tom at the window, didn't they?
They did indeed. And who was that peeping Tom?
Draco Malfoy.
Exactly. He is lurking like a bad smell.
Mm-hmm.
But what I find quite funny is that it's so Malfoy. This is where I still like with the books, and it's that very much the case of Malfoy's trying to be like, oh, these guys are doing something illegal, these guys are doing something wrong. It's like, yeah, Malfoy, you also did something wrong as well, though.
Exactly. It's sort of kind of like his vindictiveness cost him a lot, if you know what I mean. It's like he broke the rules to get someone else caught for breaking the rules.
Yeah.
But I love this, like, we'll come on to this just towards the end of the chapter, but I love the little comment of Professor McGonagall in the tartan dressing gown dragging Malfoy by the ear all the way back to the dormitory. I absolutely adore that.
Don't make up such lies. I just imagine her just giving him like a clap round the back.
100%. I absolutely love it. I love it. But now, as you know, Hagrid is now left with this issue of having a humongous dragon, and then they were sort of kind of like, well, what are you going to do with it once it's fully grown up? Then
you can't just tie it to a tree.
Yeah, exactly. This plan is then concocted to try and let Norbert go. And then Harry comes up with this really good idea of sending Norbert to live with Ron's brother Charlie in Romania.
I do love that interaction. It's like Harry just suddenly turns to Ron and goes, Charlie. It's like, you've gone mad. No, I'm Ron. It's like, no, send him to your brother Charlie.
100%. It's just like logic, Ron. Where is the logic? But
put it together, Ron. Seriously.
Yeah, exactly. But prior to that, what we then actually see is that throughout this time, Malfoy is giving subtle hints to Harry, Ron, and Hermione that he knows what's going on and that he's going to do something about it, and he's just like trying to stick that knife in. But as we say, he then essentially gets his comeuppance when Professor McGonagall catches him.
I must admit, Charlie is probably one of the characters that I wish we had. Like, I know we don't get to see him even in this chapter because it's not Charlie who picks Norbert up, but I just wish Charlie is probably one of the characters that I wish we had gotten to see. Yeah,
like, even if it was just a snippet. Like, do you know what I'm trying to think? Did we actually see him in The Prisoner of Azkaban in the Weasley family picture when they were in Egypt?
We do, and we also see Bill, which we know then from later films isn't the same actor.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just wish they had followed through a little bit more, because I think Charlie does make an appearance in the Deathly Hallows.
I'm sure he does. I'm sure he does come to the Battle of Hogwarts, doesn't he?
And it's just all these subtle little things of like, well, okay, if you've got the Weasleys all banding together, surely like bring Charlie in. Like, where was Charlie for the whole thing? It's like, sure, he lives in Romania, but you're just going to let your brother die and not even realise it? Exactly. Sorry, Mum was tied up with a dragon.
I know my brother's dead, but let's just move this along, shall we?
You know what I mean? Like, it... And the thing is, it's not like we don't know about him in the film. Because Ron even drops, like, the name into conversation. So we know that Ron has a brother called Charlie. We just never see him in anything.
Yeah.
So I wish we had gotten a bit more of the Weasleys and actually how many Weasleys there are.
Exactly. And there's a fair amount of them.
There is like a whole episode worth of Weasleys.
Which is what we're coming on to next week.
But it's almost like I had the schedule up.
I know, you and me both.
So yeah, I do wish we had gotten to see Charlie a little bit more in the films and kind of like overall. So they start making this plan to get rid of Norbert, or kind of like save Norbert from Hagrid, essentially, with Charlie. So they make a plan to take him to the tallest tower in Hogwarts. Now, interestingly, what tower would you say that was?
Whenever I look at it, I always think of the astronomy tower, but then I think of the tallest tower where Sirius Black was held. But I think for me, it's got to be the astronomy tower.
And that's what I have in my head too. Like, you've got the astronomy tower, for me, is the tallest tower. You then have Ravenclaw Common Room is the next, because it's the tallest tower in like the north section. But yeah, the tallest tower seems to chop and change depending on which book you're reading.
Exactly.
So I think for my mind, when I think of this chapter, I think they're going to the astronomy tower.
That's what I think. Although when they actually do that, it's not the three of them. It's Harry and Hermione who take Norbert to the astronomy tower. As we'll just refer to it, the astronomy tower.
Yeah.
Because Ron has been incapacitated by Norbert, because Norbert has since bitten Ron. Now, I have a few things about this dragon bite. How in the hell did Madame Pomfrey not recognise a dragon bite?
I know, honestly, it's very questionable. I mean, it's one of those things where it's a bite that's swollen. It's now going green. What other creature causes that?
Now, I would love to know what Ron told her to make, like, to that extent where...
Well, he said it was a dog.
It did say it was a dog, but what kind of dog has got, like, a bite like that? Do you know what I mean?
Also, what dog lives on Hogwarts grounds?
Apart from Fluffy and Fang.
You know what I mean? Like, what dog would have bitten Ron?
Exactly.
Like, Madame Pomfrey is not delusional.
I know. But then again, part of me kind of thinks she's just like, you know what? I really don't have time for this. Yeah, fine. It was a dog bite. I'll treat it.
It's like, it's obviously infected. It's obviously poisoned. Let's just get that sorted and get you out of here. Like, I can't be dealing with this.
I know. Then that also raises the question of, like, did she treat him for a dog bite and gave him, like, anti-venom for a dog as opposed to a dragon? So many questions.
Rabies, anti-vax.
I know. She's like, any inoculation that you're getting it.
It's like, oh, is it this bite? Yeah, let's give you this injection. Oh, is it not working? Oh, shall we give you another injection then?
Oh yeah, do you know what? Take them all. Take them all.
We might as well just do your MMR while we're here.
Exactly. I'm very much glad that free healthcare has reached Hogwarts as well.
NHSS. So yeah, we have Madame Pomfrey treating Ron for a dog bite. And then obviously with Malfoy doing his little thing and trying to make the group really uncomfortable because he knows what's going on. So he keeps trying to sneak into the hospital wing to almost divulge what's happened to Ron's hand.
Yeah.
And for good reason, this is making Ron very uncomfortable, very uneasy. Ron and Harry and Hermione have just said, well, we can't change the plans now. It's fixed. There's no chance of sending another owl back to Charlie to change any of the plans. We've just got to commit to this now. And the way around it that they find is obviously using the invisibility cloak.
Yeah.
what I then suddenly thought when I was reading this was, again, the bit in the Deathly Hallows where you've got Hermione, Harry and Norbert all under the cloak. Mm-hmm. And obviously Norbert's not small at this point. He's probably the size of, what, a medium-sized dog?
Probably. I mean, if bigger.
And they're carrying all of this under the invisibility cloak and it's covering all of them. Mm-hmm. And then there's a nice little line in the Deathly Hallows where all three of them are wearing the invisibility cloak and their feet are showing. Mm-hmm. Because it just shows how much they've grown and actually how small they are at this point.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I think they make a little reference back to all of the adventures they had whilst they were under the invisibility cloak of how useful it's been. Mm-hmm. This being one of them.
Yeah, because this is like one of the first main adventures that they've all had sort of been out in the invisibility cloak.
Mm. I think this is the first time Hermione's actually gotten to use it, is it not?
I think she had. Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, it must be.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't. Yeah, we're probably lying at this point, but I don't remember going through one of these chapters and talking about Hermione being under the invisibility cloak. So I actually think this is the first time that she's used it. Mm-hmm. So we obviously then have them sneaking their way through the castle, trying to get their way to the astronomy tower, when they are stopped in their tracks by Peeves.
Yeah.
So again, another character that we've talked about within the books that just doesn't make any appearance in the films, of actually how they've had to sneak through the castle, avoiding all of the Hogwarts ghosts. Peeves, obviously, if he bumped into them, their cover would be blown.
Yep.
They finally make it up to the astronomy tower, where they bump into McGonagall and Malfoy.
Yeah. Detention.
A detention. 20 points from Slytherin.
Which I thought was pretty tame, considering the 50 that get taken off them in the book.
Exactly.
And the movie.
Exactly. They managed to get their way through. So actually it's not like it is in the film, where they come around the corner and suddenly it's McGonagall and Malfoy finding them. Mm-hmm. We know that Harry and Hermione do make it up the astronomy tower and deliver Norbert to Charlie's friends. Mm-hmm. When they are met coming back down the stairs by none other than
Argus Filch.
With probably one of the best lines that he utters, movie or books.
I know. Oh, we are in trouble. But they had left their the invisibility cloak on the top of the astronomy tower. Now, how have you done that?
Literally, considering the most important, like it's the most important item in the books, and you just leave it at the top of the tower.
Literally,
you've snuck all that way up, only to go, oh yeah, we'll just walk back down. Like, how do you forget something like that? It's mental.
I know.
To be fair, they deserve to be caught.
Yeah,
but,
no, they really do.
Yeah. However, this is where obviously the book and the film really start to diverge, because you've got, obviously, Hermione and Harry are both going to be in detention for obvious reasons. Mm-hmm. Malfoy's going to be in detention for obvious reasons. Ron, however...
Oh, he's loving life.
He's going to be in the hospital wing, and he's probably not even going to bat an eyelid at this.
Yeah.
He has an alibi. This is very differs from the film, where all the trio end up in detention with Malfoy.
Yeah.
Now, I'm hoping we do find out, because I can't remember off the top of my head, how the fourth person, thou shall not be named yet, ends up in detention with them.
Who? Malfoy?
No.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I forgot about that.
So I'm hoping we do find out how, because so far I don't understand how this all fits in.
I can't remember. See, this is why I love doing this podcast, because when you go back through the little rereads and stuff, you forget these tiny little details. I will thoroughly enjoy that.
Yeah.
But coming on to next week, I don't know what was going through my mind when I suggested actually doing this as a topic, because I know that it's going to involve a lot of reading for us.
Yeah.
But next week we are going to be doing a bit, and I'm putting this out there, a very brief episode on the Weasley family tree. Now, at this point, whenever I say family tree, I feel like it's going to need to be the Weasley family, because if you then go on to Molly Weasley, you're going to do the Pruitts. If you go on to Harry and Ginny, you're going to end up doing the Potter family. So I think, for our sake, it will just be the Weasleys.
Yeah, it'll be the Weasleys who live in the Burrow.
I mean, I feel like we could maybe touch on their family, like, I feel like touch upon, say who was there before.
Mural.
Yeah, like the ones who came before them. Great Aunt Tessie.
Great Aunt Tessie. Oh, bless her. Love Great Aunt Tessie.
I know. She smells rotten though. But yeah, so that is what we will be discussing next week.
Yes, got a lot of revision and homework to go through for next week's episode. Do you have a question then for this week, AJ?
I don't think so, as such. Let me think.
Because I might have one.
I've got one for a cut. Well, I did have one.
So what's your question then for this week, AJ?
So, if you had a dragon bought through legal means, bullshit, what would you call it?
And then what type of dragon would you guys have?
Ooh. That's a kitchen. So we want dragon breed and dragon name.
Yes.
Enough.
I didn't say anything.
I seen your face. This is a children's podcast. We are clearly not talking about that book.
No smut.
No smut. So with that being said, we'll ask you, what kind of dragon would you have, and what would you name it?
I just suddenly thought, like, instead of call me daddy, call me mummy.
Oh my good God and govern. Well, I'm going to end the call here. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Oh, yes. So what I'll try to do is I'll try and actually cut that bit and like put it back when we start talking about Hagrid's books.
Sounds good to me.
So, yes, thank you. Next week, we will be talking about the Weasley family tree. So, thank you guys so much for listening. And as always, keep your radios tuned in for next week's episode. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the podcast or subscribe down below. There's a link just below here where you can subscribe to the podcast on YouTube.
Woo!
Or click on any of these other videos over this side if you would like to then watch one of our previous episodes. Make sure to never miss another episode and see our lovely faces every week.
You didn't mess it up this week. I am proud. I am very proud of you.
It's only taken me how many weeks?
What episode are we on now? Wait a minute.
Oh God, 26 episodes.
How is it that many? Is it actually 26 episodes?
Yeah, it's taken me 26 weeks to try and get that right.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So with that being said, we will see you next week. Cherry bubbles.
Kindest regards.